All right, hi everybody. Welcome to Industry Breakout 2. We are super pumped to have you all here. We have some really cool stuff lined up tonight. Thank you all for coming out. The theme tonight is collaboration, so we like to just create a space for game developers, game designers, anybody in the games industry, and people in the education industry, teachers, educators, informal educators, you name it, to connect around how to create value for students. So the goal tonight, ostensibly, is to talk about collaboration and what collaboration can really look like. So that's the goal of this panel. I'm Tom. I'm with an organization called Foundry 10. We're a philanthropic research organization that studies learning, and we do this across a wide variety of topics. You can check out our website, foundry10.org, if you're curious to know more. But I'll stop taking up time. Co-organizers tonight are Tim from IGDA, the International Game Developers Association. You want to talk a little bit about that, Tim? Yeah, Tim.
Everybody, thanks for coming out. My name is Tim Cullings. I represent the Seattle chapter of IGDA, the International Game Developers Association. We help game developers build sustainable careers in the industry and do networking events like this one. You can find us on igdaseattle.org. We have a couple more events coming up, like a VR Halloween party happening next week at Pyramid, where we'll have like VR games you can play and a bunch of food and fun stuff. And next month, we're going to have a talk from the lawyer who happens to be in attendance tonight, Benjamin. He's going to talk about digital resale of games on platforms like Steam and what that's going to mean. So yeah, thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Tim. And Alexa from Seattle EdTech Meetup.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alexa. I'm one of the organizers of the Seattle EdTech Meetup. We're, in the spirit of collaboration, a group of educators, both K-12 and higher ed, technologists, just ed tech enthusiasts, who get together about once a month to, we'll often bring someone in to talk about something. We've had folks talk about the technology of social and use of technology in social emotional learning, the intersection between education and brain science, all sorts of cool stuff. And we just have time to have lots of interesting discussions. So if you're interested in learning more and joining us, you can look up Seattle EdTech on meetup.com.
Thank you. And then Cammie from the Academy of Interactive Entertainment.
So thank you guys for being here. Yeah, I work with the Academy of Interactive Entertainment. It's a 2-year college level, but we're more like a trade school. So we have 2 campuses in the United States, and our mothership, we have 4 campuses in Australia. All we teach is game art, game programming, game design, and VFX. So we're a nice middle place for people who don't necessarily want to go on to a 4-year college, but all we teach is games. And it's the gamification of everything right now.
Yeah. So Cammie's the person to talk to if you're an educator and looking for clock hours. Just a heads up, that is a part of this event. She has a survey that you can fill out, and then you will get a form to do that. But without further ado, let's jump into the panel. So I'm going to sit like a normal person. Great. So let's start with just some introductions, if that sounds good to all of you. So tell us a little bit about your background, and Beverly, you and I will share a mic. Tell us a little bit about your background working at the intersection of games and learnings, or games and learning. What projects have you worked on? And maybe about a minute.
Okay, I don't know if I need a minute, but I am currently working with ArtsCore Lit program that's learning immersive technology, and we teach kids how to develop VR games. My journey to this path is kind of a winding one. The majority of my career, and I'm a writer, and 5 years ago I began developing games, digital games, but also live action games that brought story and technology together and explored like social issues, civic engagement, things like that. And so a little bit over a year ago, I was involved with a group called Building Art Space Equitably in Seattle. And it was a group put together by the City of Seattle Arts of Culture, Department of Arts and Culture, to explore how we could sustain space here in Seattle for artists. And I ended up meeting Nancy Chang from Real Girls, and she invited me to get involved with Lit, and the rest is history. So last year was our first year doing lit. We had 12 students. We had students create finished VR projects. Okay, maybe I am taking a minute. Finished VR projects, they presented them at Create 33. We went to Oculus with the help of Tim Cullings, and we also had them present their finished VR projects at Northwest Film Forum as part of their experience. And right now, at least 2 of those students, and possibly 3, are doing an internship at Foundry 10. So it's like full circle, and those kids have grown their wings and gone off to fly. So I'm really proud about that.
We hadn't even met before.
No, we met at Oculus because Tim invited us to a party at Oculus, and I'm a kind of a chatty person who says she doesn't need 1 minute and then takes 5 to talk. And I met him, and we started talking, and I was like, oh, that's great, blah, blah, blah. I need you to meet this, that, and I actually introduced him to a couple of people, and then Fabian sent me an email and said that he got the internship with Foundry 10. So this is a nice little ecosystem here that's working. It's like a baby ecosystem, but it's definitely sprouting wings. And yes, I will stop talking now. Thank you.
I think this is one. Hello. Hi, my name is Harvey Wright. I am a curriculum specialist with Seattle Public Schools. About 2 years ago, I was involved with a project with Oculus. They came to the school district and wanted to figure out how the virtual reality technology that they had might be applied in an educational setting. So after multiple conversations, we sort of identified 2 possible scenarios that we wanted to investigate further. Those were kind of instructional use, so how could virtual reality be brought into the classrooms to improve learning outcomes? And then the other was, what could we do to support students who are interested in careers in immersive technologies like virtual reality or AR? So at that time, I was actually a digital learning specialist for the district, but I became interested enough in that project after we launched it. We launched it at 2 high schools, Ballard High School and Franklin High School, trying to partner up in pair, sort of a south and a north end school with an eye towards trying to promote equity across our district. And the CTE piece also then picked up, and it became compelling enough. So career technical education, when I say CTE, that's what I'm referencing, that I actually switched roles in the district and moved over to support this idea of a career pathway for students who are interested in VR. So that work has continued, and I think that sort of the lessons and why I'm here today is the importance of how do we align and how do we not just collaborate, but we have a lot of different resources out there, and they're not being well aligned. And I have worked in public education my whole life. It's strange for me to be saying that the issue isn't access to resources. That's always sort of a problem in public education. But I feel like right now it's really about effective alignment of what we're trying to accomplish in our work. So we're currently building partnerships, trying to create an open educational resource or Creative Commons curriculum for secondary school students, and we're also working to do the same thing at post-secondary. So we're working directly with Unity Education to identify what would that curriculum look like, and how would we then make that available and launch it, with the goal being it would be something we could launch nationally and just release, and anyone who wants to pick it up and start a pathway like that within their programs would have access to that. So that's basically what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Eaton. I work here at Pacific Science Center, actually. I am an informal educator and supervisor in Tinker Tank, which is our hands-on making and tinkering space. We've done a number of game activities, both in our spaces, like drop-in activities with our guests, but then also a number of collaborations as well. One thing that our team does is help host game jams here at Pacific Science Center, working with AIE and Seattle Indies, groups like that. We've been doing that since, 2017, so a couple years now, and still going. And overall, the Science Center has had a number of opportunities to host game developers, both at Curiosity Expo events, kind of just on the fly, developers able to like beta test their games in our What is Reality space over in Building 4 there. And it's just really been fascinating just to be able to highlight the process that game developers are going through, and then a chance for our guests to play those games as well.
Hello, I'm Liz Hollerman. I am chair and associate professor at Bellevue College, and I teach digital media arts there for which 3D animation or 3D art, game design, video production, visual design sort of classes. But prior to that, I'm actually a game developer as well. I worked at Microsoft on the Forza Motorsport series. I developed Forza 5, 6, and 7, and developed numerous other games prior to that. So I have a very interesting perspective from an educational side of things. I'm also a curriculum designer, redesigning our curriculum at Bellevue College to be more of an industry standard for what companies are looking for. So I've been collaborating a lot with local industry to kind of do curriculum development, as well as project-based learning for my students. As well as, I have a lot of different collaborations, I guess. When it really comes to these sort of questions, it's like I've collaborated with educators when I was a developer, and actually developing educational games, and now I've been encouraging my students at Bellevue College, and we're partnering with educators to actually develop games for their classrooms. So yeah, a lot of different types of collaborations that are going on at Bellevue. So.
All right, and is this on? No? All right, I'm Jess. I'm a teacher. Right now, I am currently the technology coordinator or ed tech coordinator at our school. So I'm teaching technology primarily to 1st through 6th every week, as well as working with teachers to help bring technology effectively into the classroom and to learn those tools. I've also taught at the elementary, middle, and high school level in your core classes, your design, STEM, kind of all over the board, computer science, math, all of that. I've been there and kind of dabbled in a lot, and when I was doing that, teaching in elementary, middle, and high school, I got a lot of opportunities to collaborate with different developing teams that came into our classroom, like the Minecraft team, OneNote. A lot of those teams, I got to see how they were interacting with the students, what they were listening to, and then how did that in turn make an impact on what we were doing and using in the classroom. So I got fascinated by really that user experience of how does technology impact the classroom and how is it allowing me to do things in a very different way than that traditional sense of education. And I'm also, I guess, representing the students too. I'm also a student at UW and studying human-centered design and engineering. So I'm really fascinated with that user experience and how do these two groups connect with each other to really make the best learning possible for both the teachers and for the students, because you really have to pay attention to both of those user groups in the classroom.
Great. Great. All right, thank you all for that. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but what I really would like to hear is if you all have questions. So I'll ask a few. I've got my nice list here, but I'd rather I do less of the talking. So to get on this wall, it's hashtag AskIB2. That's Ask Industry Breakout IB2, and hashtag Industry Breakout. That'll put you up there, and I'll try to see if I can read your questions, but I have some folks who will text me as well. So if you have any questions, you can put them up there, or I'll ask and raise your hand, and we'll bring you a mic. Great. So just to get the ball rolling, speaking of starting out, how does a collaboration project between these groups typically get started? What could or should that look like? And if you've had any experience working in that area, how did it get started? What was the first thing that got the ball rolling? Who wants to take it? Yeah.
This is the one that doesn't, okay, it is the one that works. All right. I think one way I've seen it happen is for teachers who are already using a certain technology. Often there are a number of educators who tweet or share out what they're doing, and connecting that way can be a great way to start, because if you can find a teacher that's already using that technology, they're generally really excited to work with you, and that's a really good way to get that initial connection if you don't know where to look to start off with.
So I've worked with people who really don't know anything about games. They just know that their students play it. And as a developer, that was always really interesting because they think it's really easy to develop them and think it can be done within 2 weeks or a really short amount of time. So part of starting that level of collaboration is just kind of educating them a bit on what that is like to actually develop a game and how long it might take. And just having a really good advocate. So I used to work for the U.S. Geological Survey as an artist and developer, and we weren't even making games at the time. Like, I wasn't even interested in doing game development, but we had a project manager who was a former teacher who reached out to teachers to see what kind of stuff that they needed. And they were just wanting more interactive experiences to teach their kids about math. That was really all they wanted. And she had this idea of like, well, could we make a game? At the time, like, I'm not gonna say how long ago this was, we were using Flash to actually do the game development. And we were able to develop it within, I mean, using Flash, doesn't take that long, but it took like 6 months for developing really simple experiences. And it was really great for the students to be able to actually have this sort of interactive learning. But it was because we had someone on the side of our side who was a teacher to be able to talk to teachers directly, to kind of just like be that funnel or that pathway to educate them on like what they needed and educate us on how to bring that to students. Because at the time I was not a curriculum designer. I didn't know anything about how to teach people things. It was just having that advocate really helped us.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're sharing a mic.
I think how collaborations happen, right?
How to get started.
I think what gets it rolling is setting expectations around what they're going to actually get, what they expect to happen, and also getting input from educators on how to design a lesson plan that actually simplifies information for the students in an age-appropriate way. I think that's a big part of getting a collaboration working properly.
I think one of the things that concerns me, and this is something I feel like, I'm here from Seattle Public Schools, so I guess I have to own this piece, but how it gets started is typically access to social capital. So who has access to social capital? And that's what kicks off programs or projects or collaborations. Someone knows someone in a classroom, someone has access, their student goes to that school, those families work in industry and they're excited and they want to set up a collaboration. So it can lead to projects and they can be fantastic, exciting projects, but they typically will then only serve a small subset of students. And as we know, those students typically reflect a pretty standard demographic. So in terms of our interest in trying to kind of diversify the field, that's not well served by typically how this unfolds. I think one of the challenges that we need to do better is figure out how we're going to institutionally collaborate. So how do we norm it in a way that we can make sure that it does become more equitable and those people who do want to participate in collaborations actually have opportunities to partner up and do so in a way that we can serve as many people as possible in a way that's as equitable as possible.
One example that comes to mind for me of how a collaboration started is, maybe this is a bit of a rare example, but it really just came down to asking. There was a day when a guest just came up to me and said, I have an idea about making an activity that teaches programming while also kids will get to play Rocket League. And I said, yes, let's talk more about this. And we went back and forth a bit, and he ended up joining us as a volunteer and came up with that. And we gave him a space to be able to do that with our guests. And yeah, that wouldn't have started if he hadn't just come up to me and asked.
So find a teacher here and ask them. Yeah. You're at the place.
I also wanted to add that going into organizations and just, for example, I was invited to go to Rainier Beach High School and do a project in as part of their block party. So they have this huge thing that they do every year called Block, and students can go and learn different things. And we did the project, but it was all boys. Like, there were 21 kids. The place was packed. People were really interested in VR. And there were 21 kids and one girl. So what I did was actually went to the people and found the right people to see if we could put together a girls program. And so that collaboration is still happening, and we're trying to make that happen. But sometimes you just have to go and speak up when you talk about lack of diversity. When you see it, you have to actually say something and then be the one that takes responsibility to go and make that happen, make that change happen.
Great. All right, thank you all. I will go one more question, and I see there's some up there, and we can open it up to the audience. It'll be real fun. But how can and should we involve students into these collaborative projects? At what point do we bring them into the discussion? Yeah, take it away.
So I'm excited about this question because I was really pleased to see that Arts Corps included students right from the planning stages. So Tuesday we had a planning meeting, and 2 of our students were there giving input about how they wanted the program to run, what they wanted to learn, what type of projects they wanted to do. Did they want to do a collaborative project? Did they want to do an individual project? What organizations did they want to connect to? I mean, they were involved in the planning from the beginning. Also, at the end of the program last year, we had a professional come in and get feedback, sit down with the students, and so that they could provide anonymous feedback about the program, what worked, what didn't work, what did they want to experience that they didn't experience, how would they change the program, what would they not want to change. So I think that students need to be a part of the planning process from the beginning and at the end of the program. You can't be afraid to get feedback, and you should allow the students to give that feedback in a way that feels safe for them.
Yeah, to echo that, I have it from 2 different perspectives again. But yeah, like when we're doing our collaborations with students, I get them as part of the process very early on. Like, I'm completely transparent with it, especially because we'll also do projects where they're service learning type of projects where we'll partner with nonprofits to actually develop interactive experiences for them. It may not be games, it might just be videos, or it might be some web project. But I get the type of projects I'll go for is usually going to be dependent on the type of student I have, so they have to be involved in kind of that decision. But I've also done, whenever we were developing educational games, we got students involved as quickly as possible to test, just have them there to play it, because we weren't really sure about the type of game we were making until we had students actually giving us that level of feedback. So generally I think getting them involved early is like kind of just the thing to do. It just tends to work out and you'll make a better experience for it. And they'll have a better time for it too.
I think, speaking for the schools, and I think there's a difference obviously between the post-secondary and the secondary. We're talking about minors who are 18 years old, who are not adults, but they really want to have these kind of authentic collaborative experiences. So figuring out what that means for different student groups, and then recognizing sort of some of the constraints that are placed on that. But I know we don't have enough opportunities for the students that we would like to have. So we would certainly be interested in having more opportunities to create authentic projects that students could participate in and collaborate in. And even if it's just at that kind of design level of asking them for their ideas and what they think and how they think and projecting, putting challenges out on the table that you and your industry are facing or trying to understand, and treating them as just another demographic that might provide input into the program. I think there's a lot of ways to engage and allow them to kind of surprise us, because they're very capable. They want to participate. A lot of times school is incredibly boring. Maybe you remember So opportunities that you can actually engage with because you care about it and it has relevance, help create those for students in your community because it does have an impact.
All right, I'm going to grab a question off the giant Twitter board behind me. Yes, I can read it. Yeah, thank you. Let's see. We'll go with that one.
So, just off the top of your head, what's been your most rewarding experience collaborating, and what made it rewarding? Yeah, that's right. I didn't put this one on the list.
The most rewarding experience is seeing kids create projects and seeing the look on their face when other people are impressed by it. And I think what's so rewarding about that is that in the beginning, with the students that I worked with, there was some resistance to applying the discipline needed to finish a project, right? You have to manage your time, you have to manage the scope of that project, you have to work with other people, you have to learn difficult things. If you're programming, obviously you have to solve problems, right? And for a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old, it can be really frustrating, right? And you may want to give up because you're not accustomed to having to finish something so daunting as a game or a VR experience. Seeing them push past the pain and the discomfort to create something valuable that adults respected, their parents, their community, their peers, people in the industry, and seeing that pride in them was amazing, and seeing them go on and do other things without me being there, being big mama bear, saying, oh, here, let me take you to this thing, going out and doing it on their own. It just made me feel like I had really did my job, so I was really happy about that.
I would say working more in the elementary middle age range where you have kids that are starting to see that as these people come in, they're talking to them, that they're actually starting to see that change and how they start to take ownership when these adults come into the room where they can open up and start talking, and they see that even at a young age that their voice's value has been really meaningful, and that allows kids to really step out even if they wouldn't typically be the student who is the first to raise their hand in class. They may be great in those one-on-one conversations. So I think the highlights for me have been in those interactions where even if you're not doing a full big project together, but you're coming in, you're listening, and maybe you're coming in at different points saying, like, how's this going this year? Observing, watching. The kids pick up on if they're being listened to, and it does make a difference that you're actually, getting at their level and talking with them. So even if a huge collaboration sounds scary, even that if you're in one or two times, seeing how they're using what you're using to better understand what their needs are, if they understand how to navigate your interface, means a lot to them. Have those conversations, and those are the most impactful moments for me.
Great. All right, so turning inward a little bit here. How do you, in your organizations or the partnerships that you're in, get buy-in from the folks that need to say yes to these partnerships and collaborations to actually make them happen? What does that process look like for you all?
I mean, it's honestly, it's been kind of easy for me, oddly enough, because working for a community college, anytime you get industry involved or you're saying you're wanting to get outside community people involved, the administration's like, yes, because that's the whole goal of our college is to, we want community to come in and we want them to work with our students so our students can go get jobs and then go be successful in the community. It's ultimate goal. So buy-in was just really they're more begging people to do this sort of work at the end of the day. It's so we already have ultimate buy-in, I'd say. I would say just when it's not in an education sphere, if you're in the industry sphere, it can be difficult to get buy-in at all from that spectrum because I come from both worlds. And the buy-in that I was always able to do to be able to work with education was really kind of having a good director or just working for a good company. I worked for Microsoft, and they do a lot of community work. Games industry isn't notoriously known for that. And a lot of them is just kind of trying to tell them that they don't have to do as much management as they think they do when it comes to partnering or collaborating, because at the end of the day, they want to manage as little as possible because they already have to do an 8-hour job. So you telling them that you're going to like help offshoot that they don't have to work, additional hours or lose hours at their job, that you're going to help with that kind of would help them be more convinced at it, or having a really solid plan going in of what it would look like so they could see that picture of how it would be helpful to not only their organization, but to the community, was always a really easy way of kind of trying to help them get buy-in, because it would just kind of convince them more and it makes their company look better.
I think part of the secret is help everyone identify what their interest is in this collaboration and then make them a champion of it. Because if they see their success contingent on this collaboration happening and being successful, no one's going to work harder than they are to make sure that it happens. So you really have to create that kind of compelling reason for people to want to see it be successful and participate. And once you do that, everyone then has skin in the game, and they're all going to work just as hard as anyone else to bring it to fruition.
All right, any questions out from the audience who are not using Twitter? Yes, I will come to you. Nope, not going to knock my chair over there.
Thank you. So, my question is about content. So, what in your minds makes quality educational games? What does it take to be an effective game for a learning tool? And do you have any challenges finding or making such games?
Content is the hardest thing for anybody who's trying to teach right now instructionally with some of the content that's out there, especially for things like VR. It's incredibly time-consuming for people to find quality content. And I mean, if you think about it somewhat analogously to like watching videos, like any teacher who wants to instruct something would have to watch hours and hours of video to find some segment of that video that's actually relevant to whatever the instructional goal is in a lesson that they might be teaching. So, some of that is someone mentioned it earlier, but certainly like talk to teachers before you get too heavily involved with whatever you think you're designing that's going to make a positive impact, just so you can get their feedback on how that actually would work. Because some of it is just even logistically understanding how long a school period is and how much instructional time there is available to a teacher, and then recognizing that outside of the game there's probably going to need to be some conversations. And then we care deeply about things like teaching standards-aligned lessons. So having an understanding of like what that means and what are those standards, and if you're teaching science, what is actually meaningful in terms of a science lesson and science kind of learning outcomes versus I think it's sciencey and so therefore it's important and valuable. They're very different. So I think it's really kind of, and I think that it's important that you engage the people on the education side who is looking for a tool or a resource, just because they're going to know best what serves that need. And frankly, if you can serve that need well, for people who are standards aligned, it's going to be applicable across a broad audience or a broad grade band. So, I mean, that would be my absolute advice, is engage people who are already in the education and get their feedback, because they would love great, highly engaging content that they could use with their students. Absolutely. And it's really, really difficult to access and find and use right now.
I would echo that. When I was teaching the teens, it was impossible to really find content that was age appropriate. I mean, there was great content out there, but it was so technical or just boring or, just too much, 2-hour, 3-hour videos. I would love to see something that made game development easy to learn for middle schoolers, for teenagers, but I don't know anything like that exists yet.
I'd say just really quickly, if you're looking to develop content for any subject for education, as you're thinking about how you're going to present that, to really try not to think as much, how am I going to make an educational game, but an educational experience? Because a lot of the games that I run into, it might say, okay, well, this is good content, but it's not something my students are going to have buy-in because it feels like an educational game. It hasn't much changed from the PC CD-ROMs that I would get as a kid for games. So think experience rather than like a learning lesson, because that's how we learn. We learn a lot on field trips. So how can you create an experience?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Like, all y'all you're right. Because, like, I would say Dark Souls, that's a great educational game. I mean, you laugh, but it is. You learn through failure in that game. That's, like, literally what that game is. And it's teaching you as you go how to get through that, just beating all the bosses, right? You have to learn through that experience. And you could use that in a classroom environment, maybe in college. You could. But there's games like that where they have these sort of lessons in there. It's not explicitly educational. Like Portal is a great example of an educational game where you're actually using physics and math in this game, but like through just momentum and how you actually get through the map. So you don't have to make it explicitly educational if it just kind of has that educational level of experience. So just there's a lot of games out there that have that kind of message across, or just how the design is actually applies to things that might actually be applicable to a physics class or a math class. You just kind of have to like parse through them. And I know if there needs to be a better library of like games out there where there are popular games that kids are playing that could be used in these sort of lectures, and I think there needs to be a library for it.
So this was a great question because clearly we're not done. Everybody has something to say about it. I would just add another piece, and that's design for inclusion. And this is a great opportunity, right, when you're thinking about who are your students, and maybe if you're looking to collaborate, this is a really good point in time at which, you know, getting those student voices involved and just thinking about who they are representatively in that game and how are they going to experience your game when you consider who they are as individuals and what they're bringing to it. That's a really great opportunity. Go ahead. Everyone else talk.
Take it away, Matt.
For me, I think it's less about the content, more about the process and highlighting what those steps need to be, or focus more on like a framework that, at least in the informal ed sphere, it's for us, it's so visitor-led that it needs to be a flexible framework that we can work with and then go whatever direction the guest wants to go. So flexibility is definitely key.
All right, so we got time for about one more question. I put way too many on my list. Great, okay. Yeah, all right, so here's one that came, yeah, all right, show me the question, John. John, what do you got? All right, that one there? Yeah. Do you feel that there is still a stigma regarding video games, or has our society matured enough to view them as a tool rather than just a plaything?
I'll talk about that as a teacher. I think you have a very mixed view, and in a classroom you're going to have parents on every end of that spectrum. So as an educator or a game designer, to just make it very clear what your learning targets are, and if the teachers can explain why they're using it, you can explain how there's learning, then most parents are pretty understanding of that. But it is something as an educator, if you are bringing games into the classroom, that you do need to be prepared to answer and really be sharing what they're learning through those games so that it's apparent. So still needed, but just have a reason, and most people are pretty good.
Yes. No, there is a stigma. Like, we have a faculty commons at our college where we try to do professional development with other faculty, and I was part of a panel trying to educate faculty on how to put games in their classroom, and it was actually very busy. Like, a lot of faculty came in, and a lot of them were just unsure of even games being a thing in the classroom and why they should be a thing. And so it was mostly just convincing them that it's okay to have games in the classroom and how you could have games in the classroom. So as you kind of were saying, it was just making them see that it was okay to have them in there, and that no students wouldn't just be playing games and goofing off. They would actually be learning something. It's just all in how you frame it, and just framing it to your course outcome or whatever the lesson outcome is. And you tend to be okay in that regard. But there's definitely still a stigma, and it's hard to kind of...
Sometimes the teachers are the harder side to get than the parents, actually.
Yeah. It is. It was kind of odd how that was, but there's still some that are just like feel that they have their place and they should be there, and that all kids are playing Fortnite, and that I don't understand what that is. So you just have to frame it in a way that it'll meet that educational outcome. And that was kind of what I've been kind of trying to coach faculty on, is just like what sort of game would fit an outcome is like the discussions that we have so that they could better use them in their lessons.
I would say yes, there is a stigma, but once you tell them that kids are making games, then all of a sudden, even the people who look at games kind of weird, they're like, oh, really? You know? I would also agree, have learning outcomes. If you can say, this is what this person is learning, computational thinking, or this person is learning critical thinking, or they're learning to organize a project, or whatever, and then people open up to the fact that games are useful. So yes, there's a stigma, and even the people who have a thing against games will soften up when they realize the kids are creating something that they want to create.
I have to say, I really like this question, and I really hope that the person who came up with this question is like a graduate of Seattle Public Schools or some institution I'm affiliated with, because I like how they put the burden on the people who don't play games as being the immature ones. At least implicitly, it's pretty clear. I do think that, you know, in terms of the stigma, I mean, we have teachers around our district, some of them are here tonight, who are working really hard to create spaces where, you know, student engagement and student relationship is as important to the learning process as anything else. And so these are opportunities that really actually can build effective relationships with students and support them in terms of kind of identifying what their interests are, and then you can pivot from that and help strengthen like the direction that you want to go with it. So it can be a really effective classroom strategy, and the more we see teachers using it and adopting it, the more it gets normed as something that's not, you know, kind of outside the purview or not mature, because that's clearly doesn't come up where we see it being used in our classrooms and in the schools around Seattle.
Great. All right. Thank you, panelists. Hooray, panel. Awesome.